Michael Anthony Neal Jr. The Anointed One's Resilience, first published by Thrilla Productions, 2026. Copyright 2026 by Michael Anthony Neal Jr. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. Michael Anthony Neal Jr. asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. To protect the privacy of individuals involved in this book, all characters' names has been changed. Although this book is based on a true story, some events has been dramatized for entertainment purposes. First edition, this book was professionally typeset on Readsy. Find out more at readsy.com. This book is for the Anthonys in the world who are being mistreated and misunderstood by people who are broken and afraid of the light that is in you. Confidence and resiliency is the key factor to endure and outlast the pain others inflicted upon you. They hate themselves, so they hate you who are full of love and love yourself. They mock you for showing love while being afflicted. They call you hard to deal with because you don't do what they desire. Walk in the light and stay away from darkness. Book description: The Anointed One's Resilience, a gripping reality mystery of betrayal, spiritual warfare, and the unbreakable power of faith. When Anthony leaves the familiar streets of Richmond, California, for the rain-swept promise of Seattle, Washington, he seeks a fresh start and a peaceful life. Instead, he walks into a calculated nightmare. Contents: Forward E. Preface V. Acknowledgements V1 Title Page 1-2 Chapter 1. The Rain City Mirage 2-3 Chapter 2. The Digital Poltergeist 5-4 Chapter 3. Shadows and Whispers 8-5 Chapter 4. The Breaking Point 11-6 Chapter 5. The Courts of Man and God 15-7 Chapter 6. The Echoes of Trauma 28 Chapter 7. The Unraveling of the Conspirators 23-9 Chapter 8. Reclaiming the Narrative 26-10 Chapter 9. The Weight of Vindication 29-11 Chapter 10. The Unseen Battle Continues 32-12 Chapter 11. The Ripple Effect of Justice 35-13 Chapter 12. The Architect of His Own Peace 38-14 Chapter 13. The Legacy of Resilience 41-15 Chapter 14. The Unwritten Chapters 44-16 Chapter 15. The Enduring Truth 47-17 Chapter 16. The Quiet Strength of Forgiveness 50-18 Chapter 17. The Unseen Architects of Change 53-19 Chapter 18. The Enduring Scars and the Unbreakable Spirit 56-20 Chapter 19. The Global Reach of a Local Story 59-21 Chapter 20. The Legacy Continues 62-22 Chapter 21. The Unfolding Tapestry 65-23 Epilogue. The Unending Song 68. About the author 70, also by Michael Anthony Neal Jr. 72 Forward Isaiah 50 Israel's sin and the servant's obedience 50 This is what the Lord says. Where is your mother's certificate of divorce with which I sent her away? Or to which of my creditors did I sell you? Because of your sins you were sold, because of your transgressions your mother was sent away. 2 When I came, why was there no one? When I called, why was there no one to answer? Was my arm too short to deliver you? Do I lack the strength to rescue you? By a mere rebuke I dry up the sea, I turn rivers into a desert, their fish rot for lack of water and die of thirst. 3 I clothe the heavens with darkness and make sackcloth its covering. For the sovereign Lord has given me a well-instructed tongue, to know the word that sustains the weary. He wakens me morning by morning, wakens my ear to listen like one being instructed. 5 The sovereign Lord has opened my ears, I have not been rebellious, I have not turned away. 6 I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard, I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. 7 Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. Therefore have I set my face like flint, and I know I will not be put to shame. 8 He who vindicates me is near. Who then will bring charges against me? Let us face each other. Who is my accuser? Let him confront me. 9 It is the sovereign Lord who helps me. Who will condemn me? They will all wear out like a garment, the moths will eat them up. 10 Who among you fears the Lord and obeys the word of his servant? Let the one who walks in the dark, who has no light, trust in the name of the Lord and rely on their God. 11 But now, all you who light fires and provide yourselves with flaming torches, go, walk in the light of your fires and of the torches you have set ablaze. This is what you shall receive from my hand, you will lie down in torment. Niv version versus preface blurb. The Anointed One's resilience, they hack systems. God hacks destiny. Anthony moved from Richmond to Seattle chasing a dream, but his 5 roommates were building a cage. What began as missing food and cold stares quickly spiraled into a high-tech conspiracy of gang stalking, digital hijacking, and psychological warfare. When they stole his savings, hacked his life, and lied to the police to have him committed, they thought they had won. They thought they had broken him. They didn't realize that Anthony wasn't just another tenant. He was a child of God, anointed with a resilience that no amount of gaslighting could extinguish. In this harrowing, dramatized reality mystery, Michael Anthony Neal Jr. takes you inside the mind of a man pushed to the absolute brink. From the sterile walls of a psychiatric ward to a high-stakes courtroom showdown against the corporate negligence of Bungalow, follow Anthony as he arms himself, both physically and spiritually, to reclaim his life, his money, and his truth. A chilling reminder that the greatest weapon against treachery is an unshakable faith. You can't break what's anointed. The acknowledgements. I acknowledge the Thriller Productions publishing team. You guys are killing it this year. We are setting the bar high in 2026. Keep working hard because we will achieve our publication goals that was set at beginning of year. Let's get it these next 6 months to close out the year. V. 1 title page. The Anointed One's Resilience by Michael Anthony Neal Jr. 1-2 Chapter 1. The Rain City Mirage. The fog rolling off the San Francisco Bay had always been a comfort to Anthony, a familiar blanket that wrapped around Richmond, California. But lately, that blanket felt more like a shroud. Richmond was a city of hard knocks and harder lessons, a place where survival was a daily curriculum. Anthony had learned those lessons well, but he hungered for more than just survival. He wanted peace. He wanted a fresh start, a place where his honesty and his deep-rooted faith wouldn't be seen as a weakness or a target. Seattle, Washington, with its evergreen promises and relentless rain, seemed like the perfect baptism into a new life. He packed his life into a few bags, his most prized possession being a small, heavy fireproof safe containing his life savings, $10,000 in cash, his birth certificate, his social security card, and every piece of identification that proved he existed in this world. It was his safety net, his foundation for this new chapter. He had secured a room through a property management company called Bungalow. The pictures online showed a spacious, modern house in a decent Seattle neighborhood, shared with 5 other young professionals. It looked idyllic. It looked like the peace he had been praying for. 2 Chapter 1. The Rain City Mirage. The drive up Interstate 5 was a journey of shedding old skin. With every mile marker that passed, Anthony felt lighter. He played gospel music, letting the powerful voices wash over him, reinforcing his belief that he was on the right path. He was a child of God, anointed and protected, stepping into a season of blessings. Or so he thought. When he arrived at the Seattle house, the rain was coming down in sheets, a cold, biting drizzle that seeped into his bones. The house itself was imposing, a large craftsman-style structure that seemed to loom over the street. He unlocked the front door with the code Bungalow had provided and stepped into his new life. His 5 roommates were gathered in the living room. There was a superficial warmth to their greetings. They introduced themselves: Mark, a software developer with a nervous twitch; Sarah, a marketing executive whose smile never quite reached her eyes; David, a brooding barista who seemed to communicate mostly in grunts; Emily, a grad student who watched Anthony with an unsettling intensity; and Chris, the self-appointed house manager who spoke with a condescending drawl. Anthony, true to his nature, was open and honest. He shared his background, his reasons for moving, and his deep faith. He didn't hide who he was. He spoke of his ideology, his belief in truth, transparency, and living a life guided by spiritual principles. He thought he was building bridges, establishing a foundation of mutual respect. He didn't realize he was handing them the blueprints to his own destruction. In those first few weeks, the atmosphere in the house was subtly oppressive. Anthony would walk into a room, and the conversation would abruptly stop. He would catch them exchanging knowing glances, smirks that vanished the moment he looked their way. He brushed it off as new roommate awkwardness. He was the outsider, the new guy from California. It would take time to adjust. 3. The Anointed One's resilience, but the awkwardness soon metastasized into something far more sinister. It started with small things. His food going missing from the fridge. His laundry being moved from the dryer while still damp. When he confronted them, always politely, always seeking a peaceful resolution, he was met with a wall of denial and gaslighting. "You must have forgotten where you put it, Anthony," Sarah would say, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Maybe you're just stressed from the move," Mark would add, his eyes darting away. Anthony knew he wasn't forgetting. He knew he wasn't stressed. He was meticulous, organized. But their unified front, their seamless ability to lie to his face, planted the first tiny seed of doubt in his mind. It was a seed they were eager to water. 4-3 Chapter 2. The Digital Poltergeist. His psychological warfare escalated from the physical realm to the digital. Anthony was a man who valued his privacy and his connection to his family back in Richmond. His smartphone and his laptop were his lifelines. It began on a Tuesday evening. Anthony was in his room, reading his Bible, seeking solace from the increasingly toxic environment of the house. His phone, sitting on the nightstand, suddenly lit up. The screen flickered, apps opening and closing rapidly as if guided by an invisible, frantic hand. He picked it up, trying to swipe away the chaos, but the screen was unresponsive. Then, it went black. It powered down completely. He pressed the power button, holding it down, but nothing happened. A cold dread began to pool in his stomach. 10 minutes later, the phone booted up on its own. When he checked his messages, several unread texts from his mother had been marked as read. An email draft he had been working on was deleted. He walked out of his room, his heart pounding a heavy rhythm against his ribs. 5. The Anointed One's resilience. The house was eerily quiet. He found Mark in the kitchen, typing furiously on his laptop. "Hey, Mark," Anthony said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Have you noticed any weird Wi-Fi issues? My phone is acting crazy." Mark didn't look up from his screen. "Network's fine for me. Maybe you downloaded a virus. You should be more careful about what sites you visit." The implication was clear, a subtle jab designed to humiliate. Over the next few days, the digital torment became relentless. His phone would turn on and off at random intervals, usually when he was trying to make an important call or send a crucial email. His laptop cursor would move on its own, clicking on random links, opening bizarre web pages. He would wake up in the middle of the night to find his laptop screen glowing, the webcam light blinking ominously in the darkness. They were watching him. They were inside his devices, inside his private life. The realization hit him like a physical blow. These weren't just bad roommates, they were malicious. They were hackers, using their technical skills to terrorize him. The reason became clear during a house meeting Chris called. The 5 of them sat on the living room couches, a unified tribunal, while Anthony sat in a single armchair, isolated. "Anthony, we need to talk about the noise," Chris began, his tone patronizing. "We all value our peace and quiet, and you've been incredibly loud at night. It's disrupting everyone's sleep." Anthony stared at him, bewildered. "Loud? I'm asleep by 10 every night. I don't play music, I don't have a TV in my room." 6 Chapter 2. The Digital Poltergeist. "That's not true," Emily chimed in, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "We hear you moving around, talking to yourself. It's really unsettling. We just want peace, Anthony," David grunted. "If you can't respect that, maybe this isn't the right place for you." The hypocrisy was staggering. They were the ones keeping him awake, their digital intrusions causing his phone to blare random noises at 3 a.m., their hacking forcing him to stay up trying to secure his accounts. They were torturing him, and then blaming him for the resulting chaos. It was a classic abuser tactic: provoke the victim, then punish them for their reaction. They were scared of him. Not physically, but spiritually and intellectually. They were terrified of his ideology, his unwavering honesty, his refusal to conform to their toxic dynamic. His light exposed their darkness, and instead of changing, they decided to extinguish the light. They wanted him gone. They wanted him to break, to pack his bags and run back to California with his tail between his legs. But they underestimated the man they were dealing with. They didn't understand that Anthony was not just a man, he was a child of God. He was anointed, and the anointed do not break easily. The fire they were putting him through was only going to forge him into something stronger. But before the triumph, there would be unimaginable pain. The nightmare was only just beginning. 7-4 Chapter 3. Shadows and Whispers. Digital assault was merely the prelude. The roommates, emboldened by their initial success in gaslighting Anthony, moved their campaign of terror into the physical realm. This was not just about getting him to move out, it was about breaking him, humiliating him, and making him question his own sanity. They wanted to erase the very essence of his being, the honesty and faith that so unnerved them. It began subtly, like a chill that permeated the house even on the warmest days. Anthony would leave his room to find one of them lingering in the hallway, pretending to be engrossed in their phone, only to look up with a start as he approached. He'd catch glimpses of them in his peripheral vision, ducking behind corners, their movements too deliberate to be accidental. The whispers started too, hushed conversations that would cease abruptly when he entered a room, leaving him with the unsettling sensation that he was the subject of their clandestine discussions. Then came the following. He'd go for a walk to clear his head, seeking refuge in the anonymity of Seattle's bustling streets, only to spot Mark or Emily a block behind him, pretending to browse a shop window or tie their shoe. At 8 Chapter 3. Shadows and Whispers. First, he dismissed it as coincidence, a trick of his increasingly frayed nerves. But the pattern became undeniable. A trip to the grocery store would involve seeing Sarah in an adjacent aisle, her cart suspiciously empty. A visit to a coffee shop would find David already there, staring intently at his laptop, only to pack up and leave moments after Anthony settled in. This was gang stalking, a term Anthony would later learn, a coordinated campaign of harassment designed to isolate and destabilize an individual. They weren't just trying to intimidate him, they were trying to make him feel constantly watched, constantly judged, constantly vulnerable. The goal was to erode his sense of safety, to make the outside world feel as hostile as the house itself. The intimidation tactics grew bolder. He'd find anonymous notes slipped under his door, cryptic messages like, "We know what you did," or, "You can't hide." His car tires were deflated, not punctured, just enough to be a nuisance, a reminder that they could touch his life in ways he couldn't control. One evening, he returned home to find his bedroom door slightly ajar, though he distinctly remembered locking it. Nothing appeared to be missing, but the violation of his personal space was a chilling message. The constant surveillance, the whispers, the subtle acts of sabotage, all chipped away at Anthony's resolve. He found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, his sleep plagued by nightmares. The vibrant, optimistic man who had arrived in Seattle was slowly being replaced by a shadow of his former self, consumed by paranoia and fear. He tried to reach out to friends and family back in Richmond, but his phone would mysteriously cut out, or his laptop would freeze mid-video call. They had effectively severed his lifelines, isolating him further. He messaged Bungalow, the property management company, 3 times. His messages detailed the hacking, the intimidation, the hostile environment, the constant noise they blamed him for, which he knew was their doing. He 9 The Anointed One's resilience pleaded for intervention, for help. Each time, he received a generic, dismissive response, assuring him they would look into it, but nothing ever changed. They were complicit, or at best, indifferent. 10-5 Chapter 4. The breaking point. Pressure mounted, relentless and suffocating. Anthony's once unshakable faith was tested to its core. He prayed, he read his Bible, but the darkness in the house seemed to seep into his very soul. The gang stalking intensified. They would follow him to his job, making their presence known with subtle coughs or deliberate footsteps behind him. His colleagues, influenced by the rumors the roommates had meticulously spread, began to eye him with suspicion. He was becoming the crazy one, just as they intended. One night, after a particularly harrowing day of being followed and finding his personal belongings subtly rearranged in his room, a clear sign of intrusion, Anthony snapped. The constant surveillance, the digital torture, The gaslighting, the isolation, the feeling of being hunted in his own home, it all culminated in a terrifying crescendo. He felt his mind unraveling, the carefully constructed walls of his sanity crumbling under the relentless assault. He started yelling, not at anyone in particular, but at the oppressive atmosphere, at the unseen forces that were tearing him apart. He paced his room, his heart racing, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He felt a primal scream building in his chest, a desperate cry for help that no one would hear. 11 The Anointed One's resilience. His roommates, of course, were waiting. They had orchestrated this moment. As his cries echoed through the house, they called the police. When the officers arrived, they were met by 5 calm, concerned individuals who painted a picture of a dangerous, unstable man. Chris, ever the manipulator, spoke with practiced sincerity. He's been threatening to kill everyone in the house, officer. He's been acting erratically for weeks. We're genuinely scared for our safety. Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with feigned terror. Emily even shed a few crocodile tears. Anthony, still in the throes of a full-blown mental breakdown, was incoherent, his words jumbled, his fear palpable. He tried to explain, to articulate the torment he had endured, but it came out as a desperate, fragmented rant. The police, seeing a distraught black man and hearing the unanimous testimony of 5 seemingly credible witnesses, made their decision. Anthony was taken to the hospital, not for his physical safety, but for a psychiatric evaluation. He was admitted, diagnosed with acute stress reaction and severe anxiety, and placed under observation. The humiliation was absolute. They had succeeded. They had made him look crazy, and the system had validated their lie. While Anthony was confined, battling his inner demons and the crushing weight of injustice, his tormentors were busy. They had free rein. They broke into his room, not just to snoop, but to systematically dismantle his life. They found his fireproof safe. With a universal key, a chilling detail Anthony would later uncover, revealing Bungalow's negligence, they opened it. They stole his $10,000 in cash, his credit license, and all his vital documents. They left him with nothing but the clothes on his back and the hospital gown he wore. They wanted him not just out, but utterly destroyed, financially ruined and stripped of his identity. He was now broke, on the verge of homelessness, and with no way to prove who he was. He spent days in the hospital, the sterile white walls a stark contrast to the vibrant life he had once known. The doctors and nurses, though well 12 Chapter 4, the breaking point meaning, couldn't comprehend the psychological warfare he had endured. They saw symptoms, not the calculated cruelty that had caused them. Slowly, painfully, Anthony began to piece himself back together. He prayed, he meditated, he clung to the verses that spoke of God's protection and vengeance. He realized that this was not just a battle against 5 malicious individuals, it was a spiritual war, and he was an anointed warrior. When he was finally discharged, he returned to the house, a shell of his former self, but with a new, steely resolve. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. His roommates were conspicuously absent. He walked into his room, and the emptiness where his safe had been hit him like a physical blow. The theft was confirmed. They had taken everything, but they hadn't taken his spirit. They hadn't taken his faith. And they had severely underestimated his resilience. He knew he couldn't stay in that house, but he also knew he wouldn't run. He would fight. He would expose their treachery. He would seek justice. His first act was self-preservation. He needed to protect himself. His phone and laptop, the instruments of his digital torture, were no longer safe. He smashed them, breaking them beyond repair, severing the digital chains that bound him to their surveillance. He then used what little money he had left, borrowed from a sympathetic family member, to buy new, secure devices. But he also knew that the threat was not just digital. It was physical. He was alone, targeted, and vulnerable. He walked into a sporting goods store, his eyes hard, his resolve unwavering. He bought a slingshot, a crossbow, bear mace, a nightstick taser light, and 2 knives. These weren't weapons of aggression, but tools of defense. He would never again be caught unprepared. From that day forward, he never went anywhere without them, a silent testament to the trauma he had endured and the warrior he had become. The child of God was now armed, not with hatred, but with the fierce determination to survive and to see justice served. 13. The Anointed One's resilience. The battle had just begun. 14:6 Chapter 5. The courts of man and God. The eviction notice arrived like a final, cruel flourish. Bungalow, the property management company, citing unpaid rent and a breach of lease terms, initiated legal proceedings. They were taking Anthony to court. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. They had ignored his pleas for help, allowed his tormentors to operate with impunity, and now they were coming after him for the very financial ruin their negligence had facilitated. The stolen $10,000, his credit license, his documents, all gone, leaving him unable to pay rent, unable to even prove his identity. He was a ghost in the system, and they were trying to exorcise him. But Anthony was no longer the naive, trusting man who had arrived in Seattle. The hospital stay, the theft, the constant threat, it had hardened him, sharpened his resolve. He understood now that the legal system, like the world, was a battlefield, and he would fight with every fiber of his being. He found a pro bono lawyer through a community legal aid service, a sharp, empathetic woman named Ms. Jenkins, who listened to his incredible story with a mixture of skepticism and growing concern. "This is quite a tale, Mr. Neal," she had said, her brow furrowed as she reviewed 15. The Anointed One's resilience. The sparse evidence Anthony could provide, his own detailed, handwritten accounts, the police report from his mental breakdown which, infuriatingly, painted him as the aggressor, and the vague, unhelpful email responses from Bungalow. "It's the truth, Ms. Jenkins," Anthony replied, his voice steady, devoid of the frantic edge it once held. "And I have faith that the truth will prevail." Ms. Jenkins, a pragmatist, knew faith alone wouldn't win a lawsuit. They needed evidence. They needed leverage. The eviction hearing was set, and Anthony, despite his lawyer's best efforts, felt the cold dread of impending homelessness. He was facing not just the loss of his home, but the complete erasure of his financial stability and reputation. During the initial court appearance, Bungalow's representative, a slick, unfeeling man named Mr. Harrison, presented their case with detached professionalism. Unpaid rent, lease violations, complaints from other tenants about noise and erratic behavior. He painted Anthony as a problematic tenant, a burden. The 5 roommates were there, sitting together in the gallery, their faces a mask of righteous indignation, their eyes occasionally flicking to Anthony with thinly veiled triumph. It was a public humiliation, a shame rite orchestrated by his tormentors. But then, a flicker of hope. During cross-examination, Ms. Jenkins pressed Mr. Harrison on the security of the property. "Mr. Harrison, can you confirm that all bedroom doors in the property located at address are secured with unique keys?" Mr. Harrison hesitated, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. "To the best of my knowledge, yes." "And what if I were to tell you, Mr. Harrison, that the keys to the bedroom doors are, in fact, universal? That a single key can open every bedroom in 16 Chapter 5, the courts of man and God. That house?" Ms. Jenkins' voice was calm, but her eyes were piercing. She had received an anonymous tip, a disgruntled former tenant of Bungalow, who had revealed this critical flaw in their security system. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. "Mr. Harrison stammered, his composure cracking. That would be a serious breach of security, but I have no information to suggest that." "Perhaps not, but we intend to prove it," Ms. Jenkins declared, turning to the judge. "Your Honor, we request a continuance to investigate this claim and to file a counter-suit against Bungalow for gross negligence, and against the 5 co-tenants for theft, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." The judge, intrigued by the sudden turn of events, granted the continuance. Anthony felt a surge of adrenaline, a spark of hope igniting in the darkness. This was it. This was his chance. The tide was turning. The investigation into the universal keys was swift and damning. Ms. Jenkins hired a private investigator who, posing as a prospective tenant, easily confirmed that a single key provided by Bungalow opened multiple bedroom doors in the house. This was the smoking gun. It proved Bungalow's negligence and provided a plausible explanation for how Anthony's safe had been accessed without forced entry. Armed with this new evidence, Anthony and Ms. Jenkins filed a comprehensive countersuit. They meticulously documented every instance of hacking, every act of gang stalking, every lie, every instance of gaslighting. They presented the police report of his mental breakdown, not as evidence of his instability, but as the direct result of his roommate's calculated psychological torture. They detailed the theft of his $10,000 and his vital documents, linking it directly to the universal key issue and Bungalow's lax security. 17. The Anointed One's resilience. The discovery phase was brutal. The roommates, now facing serious legal repercussions, tried to maintain their united front, but the cracks began to show. Under deposition, their stories started to unravel. Mark, the nervous software developer, stumbled over technical details when questioned about the phone hacking. Sarah's feigned innocence crumbled under the weight of inconsistencies regarding her whereabouts during the gang stalking incidents. Chris, the self-appointed leader, found his carefully constructed narrative of Anthony's loudness contradicted by the fact that Anthony was often out of the house when the alleged noise occurred, and by the evidence of his own phone records showing late-night activity coinciding with Anthony's digital disturbances. The truth, like a persistent weed, began to push through the concrete of their lies. The manipulation, the control, the treachery, it was all laid bare. The humiliation they had sought to inflict on Anthony was now reflected back on them, magnified by the unforgiving glare of the legal system. They had tried to gaslight him, to make him believe he was crazy, but now their own sanity was being questioned. Anthony, though still carrying the scars of his ordeal, stood tall. He testified with quiet dignity, recounting the pain, the fear, the betrayal, but also his unwavering faith. He spoke of how they had tried to break him, to force him back to California, but how God had sustained him. He explained how he was forced to break his phone and laptop, how he had to replace them, and how he had to arm himself with a slingshot, crossbow, bear mace, taser light, and knives, not out of aggression, but out of a desperate need for self-preservation in a world that had turned hostile. The judge, after hearing all the evidence, delivered a scathing judgment. Bungalow was found liable for gross negligence due to the universal keys and their failure to address Anthony's repeated complaints. The 5 roommates were found liable for theft, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The court awarded Anthony substantial damages, enough to replace 18 Chapter 5, the courts of man and God his stolen money, cover his legal fees, and compensate him for the immense suffering he had endured. He had won. He had not only countered their lies but had turned their weapons against them. As Anthony walked out of the courthouse, the Seattle rain felt different. It wasn't cold and biting, it was cleansing. The roommates, defeated and disgraced, avoided his gaze. Their plan to break him had failed. Their attempt to get him locked up had backfired spectacularly. They had tried to extinguish his light, but instead, they had only made it burn brighter. He was still a child of God, still anointed, and his resilience had been forged in the fires of their malice. He had felt the pain, yes, a pain that would forever be a part of his story, but he had also felt the triumph, the vindication, and the undeniable presence of a God who does not play about his anointed. The battle was over, but the war had transformed him, leaving him stronger, wiser, and more deeply rooted in his faith than ever before. He was not just a survivor, he was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, guided by divine grace. 19:7 Chapter 6. The echoes of trauma. Teehee victory in court, while undeniably sweet, did not erase the scars. Anthony had won the battle, but the war had left an indelible mark on his soul. The echoes of trauma reverberated through his days and haunted his nights. Sleep, once a sanctuary, became a minefield of nightmares, replaying the chilling moments of surveillance, the insidious whispers, the feeling of his mind fracturing under the weight of their gaslighting. He would wake in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, the phantom sensation of his phone vibrating or his laptop screen glowing in the darkness still vivid. He had moved out of the house, of course, finding a small, secure apartment on the other side of Seattle. The new space was a haven, a place where he could finally breathe without the constant fear of intrusion. Yet, the habits born of terror persisted. He still checked his locks multiple times before bed, still scanned his surroundings for familiar faces when he left his apartment, still felt a jolt of anxiety when his new phone buzzed unexpectedly. The slingshot, crossbow, bear mace, taser light, and knives, once symbols of desperate self-preservation, now lay tucked away, but their presence was a constant reminder of how close he had come to losing everything, including himself. 20 Chapter 6. The echoes of trauma. The psychological toll was immense. He found himself struggling with trust, questioning the motives of even the kindest strangers. Every friendly gesture, every casual conversation, was filtered through a lens of suspicion. Was this genuine, or was it another subtle manipulation, another prelude to betrayal? The world, once a place of opportunity and connection, now felt like a labyrinth of potential threats. He had to consciously remind himself that not everyone was out to get him, that the vast majority of people were not malicious hackers or gangstalkers. His relationships, particularly with his family, required careful navigation. They had seen him at his lowest, witnessed the raw edges of his breakdown. Explaining the full scope of the psychological warfare he had endured was a monumental task. How do you articulate the feeling of being systematically driven insane by people who shared your living space? How do you convey the terror of having your digital life hijacked, your identity stolen, your sanity questioned by the very authorities meant to protect you? They offered love and support, but the depth of his experience remained largely incommunicable, a solitary burden he carried. He sought therapy, recognizing that healing was not a solitary journey. His therapist, a compassionate woman specializing in trauma, helped him unpack the layers of fear, anger, and grief. She validated his experiences, assuring him that his reactions were normal responses to abnormal circumstances. This validation was a crucial step in his recovery, a counter-narrative to the gaslighting that had tried to convince him he was crazy. He learned coping mechanisms, grounding techniques, and strategies to reclaim his sense of safety and agency. It was a slow, arduous process, but with each session, he felt a little more of himself returning. Financially, the lawsuit had provided restitution, but it couldn't fully restore what was lost. The time he spent in the hospital, the period of unemployment, the legal fees, even with the damages awarded, he had to rebuild his life from scratch. His credit score, once pristine, had taken a hit from the unpaid 21, the Anointed One's resilience rent, and the fraudulent activities linked to his stolen identity. He had to meticulously work to clear his name, to re-establish his financial footing, a tedious and frustrating process that served as another constant reminder of his ordeal. But through it all, his faith remained his anchor. In the darkest moments, when despair threatened to consume him, he clung to the belief that God had a purpose for his suffering. He saw his survival, his vindication, not just as a personal triumph, but as a testament to divine intervention. He had been tested in the crucible of malice, and he had emerged, not unscathed, but refined. The pain was real, the trauma profound, but so too was the strength he had discovered within himself, a strength he knew came from a source far greater than his own. He began to see his experience not just as a tragedy, but as a profound lesson. It had stripped away his naivete, forcing him to confront the darker aspects of human nature. It had taught him the true meaning of resilience, the power of perseverance, and the unwavering presence of God in the midst of chaos. He was no longer just Anthony, he was Anthony, the Anointed One, who had walked through the valley of the shadow of death and feared no evil, for God was with him. His story, once a private torment, was slowly transforming into a testimony, a beacon of hope for others who might find themselves in similar battles. 22-8 Chapter 7. The unraveling of the conspirators. While Anthony was painstakingly rebuilding his life, the lives of his former roommates were rapidly unraveling. The court's judgment had been a public condemnation, a legal stamp on their treachery. The damages awarded to Anthony were substantial, far more than they had anticipated. Their carefully constructed facade of respectability had shattered, exposing the malice beneath. The consequences of their actions began to cascade, destroying their careers, their reputations, and their fragile alliances. Chris, the self-appointed leader and chief manipulator, was the first to feel the full weight of their defeat. His condescending drawl and air of superiority vanished, replaced by a desperate scramble to mitigate the financial and professional fallout. His employer, a reputable consulting firm, launched an internal investigation after the court's findings became public. The firm, keen to protect its image, swiftly terminated his employment, citing a breach of ethical conduct and bringing the company into disrepute. His carefully cultivated network of contacts evaporated, leaving him isolated and unemployable in his field. The control he had so relished wielding over Anthony now eluded him entirely. 23. The Anointed One's resilience mark. The software developer found his technical prowess, once a source of pride, now a mark of shame. The court's detailed findings on the phone and laptop hacking led to a review by his company's security department. While direct evidence linking him to the specific acts of hacking was circumstantial, the pattern of behavior and his evasive testimony in court painted a damning picture. He was placed on administrative leave, his security clearances revoked, and eventually, he too was let go. The nervous twitch he had always possessed intensified, a constant tremor that betrayed his inner turmoil. His once promising career in tech was in ruins, tainted by his involvement in the digital torment of Anthony. Sarah, the marketing executive, whose smile never quite reached her eyes, found her carefully crafted public image crumbling. The details of her participation in the gang stalking, her feigned concern, and her calculated lies were laid bare in court. Her company, a brand-conscious advertising agency, received a barrage of negative publicity. Clients began to pull out, unwilling to be associated with someone implicated in such a cruel and manipulative scheme. She was forced to resign, her career in marketing effectively over. The superficial warmth she once projected now felt hollow, a mask that had been ripped away to reveal a cold, calculating individual. David, the brooding barista, retreated further into himself. His grunts turned into sullen silence. While his role in the active gang stalking was less prominent than the others, his complicity in the theft and his aggressive demeanor in court did not go unnoticed. He lost his job at the coffee shop, unable to face the whispers and stares of his former colleagues and customers. His already isolated existence became even more solitary, a self-imposed exile born of shame and resentment. The anger that had always simmered beneath his surface now consumed him, turning inward. Emily, the grad student, whose unsettling intensity had always been present, found her academic future jeopardized. Her university, alerted to the court's findings, initiated a disciplinary review. The accusations of harassment, 24 Chapter 7, the unraveling of the conspirators' deceit, and participation in a scheme to destabilize a fellow tenant were taken seriously. Her scholarship was revoked, and she faced expulsion. Her academic aspirations, once so bright, were extinguished, a direct consequence of her willingness to participate in the collective cruelty. The manipulative innocence she had once displayed now seemed grotesque, a chilling reminder of her capacity for harm. The 5 conspirators, once united in their malice, now turned on each other. The bonds forged in shared treachery dissolved under the weight of their individual consequences. Accusations flew, blame was shifted, and the fragile alliance they had maintained through lies and deceit fractured irrevocably. They had sought to control Anthony, to manipulate his reality, but in the end, they had only succeeded in destroying their own. The karmic boomerang, as Anthony often thought, had returned with devastating force. Their collective downfall served as a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and that the truth, no matter how deeply buried or skillfully obscured, eventually finds its way to the light. They had underestimated Anthony's resilience, his faith, and the power of a just system to eventually right wrongs. They had tried to break an anointed one, and in doing so, they had broken themselves. The victory was not just Anthony's, it was a victory for truth, for justice, and for the unwavering spirit of those who refused to be silenced or destroyed. 25-9 Chapter 8. Reclaiming the narrative. With the legal battle behind him and his tormentors facing their own reckoning, Anthony began the arduous but essential process of reclaiming his narrative. For months, his story had been twisted, distorted, and weaponized against him. He had been portrayed as unstable, aggressive, and problematic. Now, It was time to tell his truth, not just for his own healing, but to ensure that such an injustice would not befall others. His first step was to write. He had always been a reflective person, often journaling his thoughts and experiences. Now, those private reflections transformed into a powerful, detailed account of his ordeal. He meticulously documented every incident, every conversation, every act of betrayal. He wrote about the initial optimism of moving to Seattle, the subtle shifts in the house atmosphere, the chilling realization of the hacking, the relentless gang stalking, the mental breakdown, the hospitalizations, the theft, and the long, arduous fight for justice. This was not just a memoir, it was a testament, a warning, and a beacon of hope. He decided to publish his story, not for fame or fortune, but to share his 26 Chapter 8, reclaiming the narrative experience and to shed light on the insidious nature of psychological abuse and gang stalking. He chose the title, The Anointed One's Resilience, a direct nod to his unwavering faith and the spiritual strength that had carried him through. He wanted his book to be a voice for the voiceless, a source of empowerment for anyone who had ever felt targeted, gaslighted, or systematically undermined. Finding a publisher was another challenge. Many were hesitant, viewing his story as too sensational, too unbelievable. Some suggested toning down the more dramatic elements, particularly the spiritual aspects, to make it more palatable to a wider audience. But Anthony refused to compromise. His faith was not an embellishment, it was the very core of his resilience. He wanted his story told authentically, raw and unvarnished. Eventually, he found a small, independent publisher who believed in the power of his truth. They saw not just a dramatic narrative, but a profound human story of survival against overwhelming odds. The editing process was intense, forcing him to revisit the darkest corners of his memory, to relive the pain and humiliation. But with each word he refined, each sentence he polished, he felt a sense of liberation, a reclaiming of his power. As the publication date approached, Anthony began to engage with advocacy groups focused on psychological abuse, gang stalking, and tenant rights. He shared his story at conferences, in online forums, and with local community organizations. His testimony resonated deeply with others who had experienced similar forms of manipulation and abuse. He became a reluctant but powerful advocate, using his voice to raise awareness and to offer support to those still trapped in cycles of torment. He also made it a point to reconnect with the people who had stood by him, particularly Ms. Jenkins, his lawyer, who had fought tirelessly for his justice. He thanked his family for their unwavering love and support, even when they couldn't fully grasp the depth of his suffering. These relationships, tested by 27 the Anointed One's resilience fire, emerged stronger and more profound. Reclaiming his narrative was not just about telling his story, it was about redefining himself. He was no longer just a victim, he was a survivor, a warrior, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. He had transformed his pain into purpose, his trauma into triumph. The shame and embarrassment they had tried to heap upon him had been transmuted into a source of strength and inspiration. He had taken their shame right and turned it into a testament of resilience. His journey was far from over. The healing was ongoing, the vigilance a permanent part of his new reality. But he faced the future with a quiet confidence, knowing that he had faced the absolute worst of human depravity and emerged victorious. He was Anthony, the Anointed One, and his resilience was a living, breathing testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, light will always find a way to break through. His story was a reminder that while evil may conspire, divine protection and unwavering faith can overcome even the most insidious forms of treachery and manipulation. The echoes of trauma would always be there, but they were now accompanied by the resounding chorus of his triumph. 2810 Chapter 9, The Weight of Vindication v. Indication, Anthony discovered, was a double-edged sword. While the court's decision had brought a profound sense of relief and justice, it also carried a heavy weight. The public nature of the trial meant his ordeal was no longer a private torment but a matter of public record. News articles, though generally sympathetic, sensationalized aspects of his story, reducing his complex trauma to soundbites and headlines. He became, for a time, the man who sued his roommates, a label that, while accurate, felt reductive. He found himself navigating a new kind of scrutiny. People approached him with a mixture of awe and morbid curiosity. Some offered genuine empathy, sharing their own stories of psychological abuse or betrayal. Others, however, seemed to view him as a spectacle, eager for the salacious details of his suffering. He learned to discern between the truly supportive and the merely curious, a skill honed by his past experiences. His advocacy work, however, proved to be a powerful antidote to the lingering feelings of isolation. Speaking to groups, sharing his story, and connecting with other survivors gave his pain a purpose. He realized that his experience, 29 the Anointed One's resilience as horrific as it was not unique. Many people, particularly those in vulnerable housing situations, faced similar forms of manipulation and abuse, often without the resources or resilience to fight back. He became a voice for them, a testament to the possibility of overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. He focused particularly on the insidious nature of gaslighting. He explained how it wasn't just about lying, but about systematically undermining a person's perception of reality, making them doubt their own sanity. He detailed the subtle tactics, the denial of events that clearly happened, the projection of their own faults onto him, the constant questioning of his memory and judgment. He taught others to recognize the signs, to trust their instincts, and to seek external validation when their internal compass was being deliberately skewed. He emphasized the importance of documenting everything, a lesson he had learned the hard way. Anthony also delved into the legal intricacies of his case, explaining how the universal keys had been the linchpin of his countersuit against Bungalow. He highlighted the importance of tenant rights and the responsibility of property management companies to ensure the safety and security of their residents. He worked with legal aid organizations to draft proposals for stricter regulations regarding shared housing, advocating for clearer guidelines on tenant screening, conflict resolution, and property security. He wanted to ensure that no one else would fall victim to the kind of systemic negligence that had almost cost him everything. The financial restitution allowed him to invest in his future. He completed a certification in security, turning the weatherization of technology against him into a new career path. He wanted to understand the digital landscape, not just to protect himself, but to help others secure their digital lives. He learned about encryption, network security, and digital forensics, transforming his trauma into expertise. This new knowledge empowered him, giving him a sense of control over a domain that had once been used to torture him. 30 Chapter 9. The weight of vindication. He also made a conscious effort to rebuild his personal life. He reconnected with old friends, cautiously forming new ones. He found solace in his church community, where his faith was celebrated and nurtured. He volunteered, giving back to the community that had supported him in his darkest hour. He started painting again, a hobby he had abandoned during his ordeal, finding a therapeutic release in the vibrant colors and abstract forms that emerged on his canvas. Each brushstroke was a step towards healing, a visual representation of his journey from darkness to light. The physical tools of his self-defense, the slingshot, crossbow, mace, taser, and knives, remained tucked away, but their significance had evolved. They were no longer symbols of fear, but of his unwavering commitment to self-preservation. He had learned that while faith was his ultimate shield, practical preparedness was also essential in a world that could, at times, be profoundly cruel. He carried the lessons of his past, not as burdens, but as wisdom, guiding his steps forward. His journey was a testament to the profound truth that even from the ashes of betrayal and humiliation, a new, stronger self can emerge. He had faced the abyss, stared into the eyes of pure malice, and had not only survived but had triumphed. The pain was a part of him, an unanswerable chapter in his life story, but it no longer defined him. He was defined by his resilience, his unwavering faith, and his commitment to justice. He was Anthony, the Anointed One, and his story was a living, breathing sermon on the power of perseverance and the enduring grace of God. 31:11 Chapter 10. The unseen battle continues. Even with the legal victory and the public vindication, Anthony understood that some battles are never truly over. The psychological scars, though fading, were a permanent part of his landscape. He had learned to live with them, to integrate them into his identity, but they required constant vigilance. The world, after all, was still full of shadows, and the human heart, capable of immense love, was also capable of profound darkness. He continued his work in security, finding a deep satisfaction in protecting others from the very digital intrusions he had suffered. He developed workshops and seminars, teaching individuals and small businesses about online safety, privacy, and how to recognize and combat digital harassment. He spoke from experience, his words carrying the weight of lived truth, making his advice resonate with an authenticity that no textbook could convey. He became a sought-after expert, his past trauma transformed into a powerful tool for good. His advocacy for tenant rights also gained momentum. He collaborated with housing organizations, sharing his story with policymakers and legislators. 32 Chapter 10. The unseen battle continues. He pushed for laws that would hold property management companies more accountable for tenant safety and security, particularly in shared living arrangements. He argued passionately for better protections against psychological abuse and for clearer legal recourse for victims of gang stalking. He knew that changing laws was a slow, incremental process, but he was committed to chipping away at the systemic vulnerabilities that had allowed his torment to flourish. One of the most challenging aspects of his ongoing healing was confronting the lingering anger and resentment. While he had forgiven his roommates in his heart, understanding that true forgiveness was for his own peace, the memory of their cruelty still stung. He realized that forgiveness did not mean forgetting, nor did it absolve them of their actions. It simply meant releasing himself from the corrosive grip of bitterness. He found strength in the biblical teachings of turning the other cheek, not as an act of submission, but as an act of spiritual power, refusing to let their hatred define his future. He also learned to embrace the concept of spiritual warfare. He understood that his ordeal was not just a series of unfortunate events, but a deliberate attack orchestrated by forces of darkness. His faith became not just a comfort, but a weapon. Prayer became his shield, scripture his sword. He recognized that his resilience was not solely his own doing, but a divine endowment, a manifestation of God's protective hand over his anointed. This spiritual perspective gave his suffering a deeper meaning, transforming it from senseless cruelty into a crucible that had refined his spirit. Anthony's life became a testament to the transformative power of faith and resilience. He was a living example that even when stripped of everything, when pushed to the brink of madness, one could not only survive but thrive. He had faced the ultimate betrayal, the most insidious forms of manipulation, and had emerged with his spirit intact, his faith strengthened, and his purpose clarified. 33 The Anointed One's resilience. He often reflected on the journey from Richmond to Seattle. The initial hope, the descent into chaos, the desperate fight for survival, and the eventual triumph. It was a story of a man who had been targeted for his honesty, his ideology, and his unwavering connection to God. A man who had been deemed a threat because his light exposed the darkness of others. But in trying to break him, they had only succeeded in revealing the unbreakable spirit of an anointed one. His book, The Anointed One's Resilience, became a bestseller, touching countless lives. It was translated into multiple languages, reaching a global audience of survivors and seekers of truth. He received letters and emails from people all over the world, thanking him for sharing his story, for giving them hope, for validating their own experiences. He realized that his pain, once so personal, had become a universal message of strength and perseverance. Anthony continued to live in Seattle, a city that had once represented both his greatest hope and his deepest despair. He had found peace there, not the naive peace he had initially sought, but a hard-won, resilient peace forged in the fires of adversity. He was a man who had walked through hell and emerged with a testimony, a living embodiment of the truth that God does not play about his anointed. His story was a perpetual reminder that even when the world conspires to break you, faith, resilience, and the unwavering hand of God can lead you to ultimate victory. The echoes of trauma might linger, but they were now overshadowed by the resounding anthem of his triumph, a symphony of resilience played out against the backdrop of divine grace. 34:12 Chapter 11. The ripple effect of Justice Teehee legal victory and the subsequent publication of The Anointed One's Resilience created a ripple effect that extended far beyond Anthony's personal vindication. The detailed account of Bungalow's negligence, particularly the universal key issue, prompted a class action lawsuit against the property management company. Other tenants, emboldened by Anthony's courage, came forward with their own stories of security breaches, unaddressed complaints, and a general disregard for tenant safety. The lawsuit, spearheaded by Jenkins, exposed a pattern of systemic failures within Bungalow, leading to significant reforms in their security protocols and tenant complaint handling processes. The company, facing immense public pressure and financial penalties, was forced to overhaul its operations, ultimately making shared housing safer for countless individuals. Anthony's story also sparked a broader conversation about the often overlooked issue of psychological abuse and gang stalking in shared living environments. Mental health professionals, legal experts, and social workers began to collaborate on developing resources and support systems for victims. Workshops were created to educate individuals on how to identify and respond to gaslighting, manipulation, and coordinated harassment. Anthony 35, the Anointed One's resilience, was often invited to speak at these events, his lived experience providing invaluable insights and a powerful human face to the abstract concepts of abuse. The media, initially drawn to the sensational aspects of his story, began to delve deeper into the societal implications. Investigative journalists explored the psychological impact of prolonged harassment, the legal challenges faced by victims, and the ethical responsibilities of landlords and property managers. Documentaries were produced, podcasts were launched, all contributing to a growing public awareness of these insidious forms of abuse. Anthony, once a victim, had become a catalyst for change, his personal tragedy transforming into a force for social good. His book also resonated deeply within faith communities. Pastors, theologians, and spiritual leaders used The Anointed One's Resilience as a case study in sermons and Bible studies, exploring themes of faith under duress, divine protection, and the spiritual battle against evil. Anthony's unwavering belief in God's intervention, even when faced with overwhelming odds, inspired many to deepen their own spiritual journeys. He received invitations to speak at churches and religious conferences, sharing his testimony and offering hope to those who felt their faith wavering in the face of adversity. The ripple effect even touched the lives of his former tormentors, albeit in a different, more punitive way. The class action lawsuit against Bungalow also brought renewed scrutiny to the actions of the 5 roommates. While their initial legal penalties were significant, the ongoing public discourse and the mounting evidence of their coordinated malice led to further civil actions. Some faced additional lawsuits from other tenants they had previously harassed, emboldened by Anthony's success. Their reputations remained irrevocably tarnished, their professional lives in tatters, and their personal relationships strained beyond repair.